I want to thank you very much for joining us. We got an exciting day today. We've got one of the best credit report advisors. I like to go credit report advisors because, I hate the term credit repair. I like somebody that, if you're going to advise somebody on something special like a life insurance policy or mortgage origination, that's what they specialize in. This guy, his name is Blair. He's going to talk about how can you get credit reports better. It's just that simple. All right. And he's going to talk about also, there's a Federal Trade Commission that overviews, in Washington, D.C., they overview these credit bureaus and they fine them. There's huge fines if they do bad things to consumers. And they're not pro-consumer. What they are is they're pro-subscriber, the people that pay them. That's what they care about. They don't care about you. And then there's a reason why the number one complaint to the Federal Trade Commission is because of consumer-related issues. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Blair. How you doing, Blair?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Well, I appreciate your time today. I know you've got a company and that's all you do. And you've been doing it for about 5 years, is that right?
Really, almost 6, yeah.
Okay. Congratulations. 6 years. And, and you really do enjoy your work, don't you?
Well, I do. I don't know how much we have talked before about my past, but I used to be a mortgage broker, mortgage loan officer myself.
Okay.
And I really enjoyed doing that because it was a way of helping people achieve the American dream, get into a house.
Yeah.
No different than, and the satisfaction is no different than a realtor who gets to help people get in a house. But I'm part of that process, that team. Well, when things began to change in 2007, 2008 in the whole mortgage industry, everything was up in the air. And make a long story short, because I don't want to give you the whole story, but I ended up in credit repair because, to answer your question, I didn't want to get out of that scene of helping people get into homes.
Right.
And what I found when I was a mortgage loan officer was that too many people would come to us to get a loan, and we had to turn them down because of credit issues or debt issues and so forth. And that we didn't really have a way at that time. My partner and I didn't have the expertise and the time to help spend time with them to build up their credit so they could.
Sure.
And eventually, so I decided that's where I was going to go. I was going to go help the person that had credit problems and wanted to buy a house but didn't know where to start because they were kind of like they're in the pit of credit problems. And, it's easier to maintain your credit. It's harder when you've got some credit problems and you got to get out of that pit. And so I enjoy helping people.
Great. Yeah. And we as a rent-to-own home advisor to buyers that just miss financing, they need 6 to 12 months to get their FICO score up. And they don't know even 3 little tips on how to get their credit better because they can't go anywhere to get the real information on how that FICO score actually gets increased. And a lot of them need, it's kind of like weight loss. They're dating again and they've been out of the dating pool for a while and now they got to lose some weight, but they don't know how to do it. And they need somebody to tell them how to do it the most effective way. And it takes a while. I always tell my tenant buyers, look, this is a 4 to 10 month journey you're on to get your FICO good enough, not just to get a mortgage, it's to get a good rate.
Yeah.
Because if you get a good rate, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in difference.
In the interest payments. That's right.
Yeah.
It's interesting that.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, I was going to say it's interesting that you brought up about giving some tips. The consumer laws were actually written for consumers, but anything that the government does, it's like the Fair Credit Reporting Act. It's an 84-page document written for the consumers. Now, who's going to sit around and read 84 pages so they know what their rights are and how to deal with the system? And so consumers people come into you on the rent-to-own, they could get on there and spend hours and go through this big learning curve and trial and error, and could conceivably, work on their own credit. But I have found that most people find that it's easier to come to someone who knows what they're talking about.
Well, we live in a society that, if there's a problem, we go to an expert. And you don't want to screw this up, by the way. And I've had people come to me and says, look, that rent-to-own stuff doesn't work. And I go, well, why doesn't it work? And they went to another credit repair company and some of these paper mill places that just send out dispute letters, and that's all they do. And they didn't get any meaningful results in their FICO score. And they go, well, everybody's just out to rip you off. So they're like burned too many times. And I says, let me, and I just tell them, I says, my grandmother used to tell me something, I'm going to tell it to you. He says, what's that? He says, if you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. And if you think all doctors are bad or all lawyers are bad or whatever, then, I can't work with you. If it's got that bad a taste in your mouth, you need to have a positive attitude in order to work with your credit improvement specialist that you're going to be working with. And you got to listen and implement and not be suspicious and doubtful. You need to have some faith. So why don't you rent for a couple more years and come back to me? And I just tell them that.
It's a team effort.
I'm not interested in working with somebody that's that negative. It's just not going to work. The credit improvement step is a critical step of our success. If it's not done right, we're dead in the water. We won't have a good reputation locally. Just for your information, our students, basically, I don't want them learning about credit. I want them to learn about how can we help that seller sell at top price? How can we help that buyer get to a point where they can get to the mortgage, but we don't want them learning about it because it gets in the way of their business. We want them to just get an expert and have faith that that expert's going to do a good job.
Yeah. And that way you don't have to juggle so many things and not do any of it well. Best thing to do is
so many pieces to our puzzle when we market for leads for a seller that has no equity and they can't sell with an agent, and that's tiring right there. And the tenant buyer side is really tiring too. It's like being a property manager with tenants and all this other stuff. And if you had to also, it's kind of like the kind of student that I look for is kind of like an insurance salesman that really is good with people and dealing with ideas versus selling cars. There's talking about concepts, and credit's a concept. It's not something you can hold in your hand. And we want people to be able to paint pictures and use analogies. And to tell you the God's honest truth, we deal with some people that want to have their own business, but this is a belly button business. You got to go shake hands and say, hey, we're going to help you. We're going to take good care of you.
Yeah.
And not everybody isn't made to do that. They're not made to do that. Just I'll ask you a couple of quick questions. I may already have the answers, but it's just for our group of people, especially our tenant buyers, but our sellers too. They need to understand, because some of our sellers says, well, how bad is their credit? And I tell the sellers, says, only one problem can stop a mortgage. It doesn't have to be a total messed up report. It can be just one thing, and it might not even be their fault. Right? You've probably seen that in your mortgage career.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, the big thing is that people should know, number one, Federal Trade Commission overviews the three bureaus, right?
Right.
and they're their boss, and if they do something wrong, they get fined, right?
Right.
Is it a $10,000 fine, I think? Is that right?
Oh, yeah, there's various different fines, but well, here's the thing about the three bureaus, the credit bureaus, that a lot of people don't realize that the credit bureaus are for-profit companies.
Right.
They're not government agencies.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago, there was hardly any regulation on them at all, and their job is just two things. One is to gather all this information from creditors, sending them information about the client, the consumer, mm-hmm. and then they gather it up and put in this nice little report, and then send it to their subscribers, which are other creditors, other banks and creditors who are wanting to make credit decisions.
Right.
And so you mentioned earlier that their goal really isn't the consumer. Their goal is who's paying for their reports, who's paying for their information that they've so, well put together and put into a nice little package to make a little profile of each consumer. And that's their commodity, okay?
Right.
The government came in years ago and said, and it's kind of been a process, and it's still very, very weak, but the government came in years ago and said, okay, you got to start caring about the consumer a little bit. You can't just think about the lender and your subscribers. You're dealing with consumers' private information, right? Mm-hmm. Personal and private information. So we're going to make some laws that says show you at least this is the minimum you got to do to consider the consumer. And a lot of that has to do with that they have a right to a credit report once a year, a free credit report once a year. Mm-hmm. There's so many. I'm not going to tell you. It's 84 pages.
Rattle them off. But tell them what the little guy needs to know. Yeah.
Well, that's true. I mean, everybody has a right to a free credit report once a year, and you can go to annualcreditreport.com and get your free credit report from all three bureaus. It will not have your FICO score.
Right.
Because FICO is another for-profit entity, completely separate from the bureaus, and they have their own goals of how they're going to make money, which again is the lender or the potential credit giver, not the consumer. Mm-hmm. So you have to get your FICO scores and pay for those at another site like myfico.com or something like that. Mm-hmm. The other law that they said is that the credit reporting agency, every time you go and apply for credit, then by law they're supposed to supply you with a new credit report, a letter, and then a credit report explaining, showing you why you were turned down for credit, if you were turned down for credit. Okay. Another law that they did, thinking about the consumer in mind, is they said that every credit bureau must be able to, they have to, all the information on the credit reports have to be accurate.
Right.
And that the consumer, if they think something's not accurate, they have a right to dispute it. Yeah. And then the three bureaus have to come back and answer. And in answering that whether something is accurate or not, then they're going to have to do an investigation to verify the information. Okay? Then the third thing is that you can't have negative stuff on there more than 7 years, and 10 years for bankruptcy. And that's the other little main concept behind the Fair Credit Reporting Act in thinking about the consumer. I mean, think about it. If they didn't have those laws, they could keep that negative stuff on there your whole life, and you'd never be able to get credit again. Yeah. So
that's so true.
That's what, yeah. So
this some of those let's say the credit bureaus, some of them are a bit flippant. They'll say after you request an investigation, let's say a charge off or something. They'll just say, well, it came back verified, and that's it. And they don't have any proof that they actually talked to the subscriber. They're just trying to get rid of you, right?
That's right.
And that's a little bit of a kind of a bullying tactic that some of these credit bureaus use. And you've probably seen that quite a bit, right?
Oh, I call it a smoke screen, basically. They just throw in a smoke screen. They're hoping that the average consumer will go, oh, well, I don't know. I guess it's accurate. That's it. I got to accept it. That's right.
Yeah. So it's important that is one of the reasons why a good FICO coach to increase your FICO score. There's the value in that. Because the average consumer, it's kind of like a lawyer yelling at a plaintiff that has no law background and say, well, because of XYZ statute, you can't do that. And they have no way of checking the statute to see if the guy's telling the truth. It's like,
that's right.
Okay, But one of the things that a lot of our tenant buyers worry about, they're going to sign a lease, they're going to sign an option to purchase agreement, and they got a certain time period to get their scores high enough so that they can get a mortgage. And their number one worry is, what if I don't get the mortgage? What if I can't get my credit better within that period of time?
That's right.
I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about the time frame that it takes to increase your FICO score.
Well, and that's a good question because, obviously
it's different with everybody too. I'm not trying to pigeonhole you into one answer, but let's say you had a light problem, a medium problem, and a severe problem, and you've seen the gamut. How would you answer that?
Well, a light problem would be somebody that, say, has a 600 score and they're trying to get above 640 to get a FHA loan. So there's just 40, 50 points that they're trying to get up. Okay. A medium problem is what we call somebody who probably needs to get a good 100-point increase. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're at a 550, 580 and they need to get above 640, 650. And then there are people that just, depending on their circumstances, unfortunately, they're in the high 400s on their credit score and they need to get a 650. We need to get above 640. I always try to shoot above 640, like 650 or 660 so we can be sure.
Sure.
So they need almost a 200-point increase.
Right.
And there's a reason, there could be two reasons that somebody is either a light case, medium case, or a difficult case or a challenging case, is going to be based on their credit history and how many derogatories or negatives that are on there, okay? Whether it be a bankruptcy, whether it be a repo on a car, whether it just be charge-offs, late, it doesn't matter. But the number of derogatories you have over the last few years is going to make that big difference.
Okay.
But here's the key that a lot of people don't realize, and is that it can make a big difference, is they don't have enough positive credit.
Yes.
So people will come to me and they'll have, I only got these 3 negatives on there. How come I only have a 520 credit score? And I'll say, well, when's the last time you did anything on credit? Oh, we cut up the credit cards 4 years ago and we've paid cash for our cars and we don't do credit anymore. Well, that's why you have only a 520 instead of a 700, because you got to have credit to build credit, Yeah,
so I try to tell them it's kind of like your GPA, If all you got are D's and F's and you don't have any A's or B's to counterbalance that, you're going to have a really low GPA and there's nothing we can do about that. But, if you partied a lot your freshman year and got a couple of C's and D's and you rehabilitated yourself and you could see for 3 straight years you got B's and A's, you're probably a good risk for grad school because everybody screws up in their freshman year. And your ability to do everything perfect. I mean, and this is where a coach comes in too, I know you've got wonderful resources to get new positives on your bureau as quickly as possible that a lot of people don't have that knowledge. That's specialized knowledge that very few people have. Even if you walk into your Wells Fargo or Bank of America banker and say, how do I kind of counterbalance this bad history a couple of years ago? How can I rebuild it?